some questions via the chat, but I'm conscious that it's 11 minutes past 8. So if you're all happy, if we could just direct one question. We've got 4 excellent panelists. So if we just direct one question to each of the panelists, and if we can make it short and concise, as much as I love opinions, questions ought to be short and concise to permit our panelists to give an informed response. Shirley and Bevan, I haven't actually got access to the chat, so if you wanted to select one question for each of the panelists, so that should pull us up by about, I don't know, say 20 minutes past 8 or just thereafter, just in case people have commitments. We've still got 200 people online, so let's make the most of this time if we can.
I have a question from the chat, Kellie. I picked it up. It says, what are the likely triggers for an Aussie disaffiliation from the United States?
Thank you. Was that Bevan?
Yep.
Thanks, Bevan. Now, which panelist would like to take that one? Oh, Alison, thank you for volunteering. Over to you.
Thank you, Bevan, and thank you to the questioner for that. It goes exactly to the heart of what I was talking about. And if I'm right, the position that we are in of stranglehold, as you've described it here, is due to our roping ourselves in to the US alliance in ways that alliance was actually never designed to do. The Americans didn't want an open-ended defense treaty with Australia, which obliged them, as they are obliged with South Korea and Japan, for instance, to defend them no matter what. They wanted an equal treaty in which we were obliged to do things for them and they were obliged to do things for us only if there was a threat to one party or the other in the Pacific area. And then, only then, all they had to do was, in conformity with their constitutional processes, consult with each other. In other words, what Australians have done, Australian leaders have done ever since 1952 is exaggerate what ANZUS gives us. Being without ANZUS would be of no great loss to Australia at all, but most Australians don't understand this because it's been talked up for years and years as the thing that's kept us safe. On the contrary, all the wars that have taken place in our region since that time have been American wars, and we have gone to them voluntarily. So being without it, or rather just setting it aside in ways that it doesn't mean we have to abrogate it. It's not a good idea to abrogate treaties. We don't even need that. We just set it aside. And as I suggested earlier, we warned the United States which conflicts we're interested in engaging with and which we are not. You'll remember that Menzies in the 60s told the Americans that we would not go to war over Quemoy and Matsu. And did that cause any great problem either for him or for Australia or Quemoy or Matsu? No. And it wouldn't in this case either. But it would be a massively more benefit for Australia not to get roped into a war over Taiwan. And so that aspect of independence is the way to go, I suggest. Malcolm Fraser said it. You know, it's not a left-leaning idea. It's across the board because it's about Australia's real national interests, not the ones that are currently claimed to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Bevan, have we got a question there for...
Sorry, Kellie, I've got a question.
Oh, sorry, Shirley.
Yeah, that's okay. It's a question that also arises as a bit of a statement, and I guess it's to Brian and any other panel members. Australia's alliance with the US is more than a military pact. it reflects economic penetration of Australia's economy by US investors. And this was illustrated in Clinton Fernandez's book, Sub-Imperial Power. Would anyone like to comment on that, on the relationship between the military and the economic?
Brian, would you like to take that one?
You're muted, Brian.
I'd like to say something after Brian, very quickly.
It unmuted now. Okay. The Americans don't have as much power in the economic area in Australia as they have military power. And the big reason for that is that China has grown so strongly its economy. It is not grown, just one of the great lies that everyone tries to put out now is that its military has grown, spending has grown massively, the biggest since World War II. That is not true. All that's happened is the percentage of GDP stays the same, but the economy has grown a lot since the incredible poverty of the time when Mao's time, so that it's an average of 1.7% of GDP, whereas the United States spends about 3.5% of its GDP on the military. The United States spending is more than the combined total of the next 9 countries. So, but here it doesn't. It's military spending matters, but its economy is not able to exercise so much power because of the other things I said in my talk, particularly about the movement away from the use of the US dollar as the main currency. So you can stand up to the Americans a lot more, I think, on the economic front, and I would argue also on the military front. I mean, the simple thing is, if you don't want to go to war with China, don't do anything that would facilitate that, and don't have which will be delivered in 50 years' time, nuclear submarines which can sit outside, because this is what Morrison said the other day was their job, outside a Chinese base, and then lob missiles into it.
Yeah, that was it.
I don't
Thank
need
you, Richard. Would you like to make a comment?
to said it.
Okay, have we got a question perhaps to direct to Greg now as the final speaker?
Oh, there's 195 people.
And please remain on mute if you can while we finish off our questions.
I've got a couple of questions here, Kellie, and maybe Greg or Richard or whoever. One question is from the chat: what is the nature of the hold that the US has over the Australian political class?
Yeah. If I on that,
thank you, Richard.
I think that's a very, very good question, and Brian may well have much more to say about this from his own experience, deep experience in Canberra. I'm always astonished by the way in which particularly Labor politicians and kind of people in that circle say, "Oh, Richard, you're quite right about the Americans, but we dare not. We dare not. Every time we did something in the past, we were punished so badly. Look what happened to Whitlam." Or going back further, "Oh, after Petrov, the Americans cut us off from intelligence, and or not after Petrov, after the earlier foreign affairs or external affairs spies issue, we were cut off and it was terrible, and we never want to go back." And that, Richard, is why we will never, ever allow any daylight between us and the Americans. And Brian's given a couple of very good examples about what we could do. This is extraordinary. It's more than self-censorship and self-abnegation. It's cutting yourself off at the feet. You are not even trying to do this. There are a wide range of issues. What's been remarkable tonight has been, the old line that, it used to be in the 1980s, 1990s, used to be said, Japanese imperialism walks on one leg, but the American empire walks on four. Well, it certainly bloody does. But those legs are getting very, very infirm in all but the military areas. That all of them, I suppose you might be able to say that communications, cyber technology is a pretty strong area, but there's some resistance there. But the important thing is that Brian's absolutely right. The military is very strong, but the other side of that is that China's military is nowhere near as strong as the Americans. And there is a very strong incentive and a lot of talking amongst the American military that we must not leave it too late to stop China's rise. Now, I don't think that a lot of the kind of, closed shop multilateralism, friendshoring that is going on in this rapid adjustment to trying to cut the Chinese off economically is going to work. I think Brian's given good examples of the way the Chinese are responding, and we can think of a whole lot more to come, I think, and Australia is going to look pretty stupid about that in many respects. But that means the attraction of war to certain parties in the United States is very high. And the capacities are stronger than they've ever been, I would say, militarily, relative to China, quite different from the Soviet Union bilateral balance. And that's something, well, we just don't know. But the main thing is we need to stop it. We need to avoid it. We need to stop talking about it. And the first thing is for Australia to understand, as I think Brian put very well, it is possible for Australia to take independent positions on at least some of those four legs. And unless you start thinking about the capability of doing so, you won't do it. And I'll just finish by advertising my colleague Vince Scapatura's extraordinary book on the Australia-American Leadership Council as a way of penetrating into Canberra and to business circles. And almost every Labor politician we've mentioned tonight is an alumni of that august organisation.
Thank you, Richard. I see that there is one question here, unless you wanted to add to that, Brian. There's a question here for Greg. Is AUKUS unconstitutional?
I saw that, Kelly. I think not, because the foreign affairs power in the Constitution gives enormous latitude to governments to enter into treaties. I'm trying to remember the last time there was a challenge to an Australian treaty. There have been some challenges to aspects of free trade agreements, but on narrower grounds. I haven't looked at it closely, but I haven't seen any real writing about it, the constitutionality of AUKUS, because it's not only the foreign affairs power, it's also the defence power, which the Commonwealth can rely on. And in generally speaking, the High Court for a long, long time now has given the Commonwealth very, very broad powers. I mean, lastly, on the issue of the defence power, in the Jack Thomas case, Thomas was an Australian who found himself, I think, wandering around in Afghanistan, a bit like Hicks, but not as incriminating as Hicks, just in the sense of where he was. I don't mean to say Hicks. I don't think Hicks did anything wrong, but Thomas was even more remote. And he was prosecuted, and then he was put on a control order. And control orders under the anti-terror laws, you don't actually have to be convicted to have ASIO and the AFP wandering around, making sure that you don't talk to particular people, etc. Actually, very quickly, I'll tell you a funny story about Jihad Jack Thomas. I saw him at the airport one day, and I went over to him and chatted to him because his lawyer was a friend of mine. And he was very, very nervous. And I said, Jack, it's okay. ASIO will take the photo. Look me up. They'll see that, I've become terribly radical, but I'm okay because I don't have bombs, I don't use guns, etc. So it's okay. Let's have a chat. Anyway, just very quickly, but what the High Court said about defence power was that the majority said you could use the defence power. It was broad enough to use it in the context of domestic terrorism. So I'm saying that because it gives you an illustration of how difficult it is to challenge Commonwealth powers in the area of defence and foreign affairs. So I haven't seen anything on AUKUS particularly, but I would think that it would be difficult.
Thank you very much, Greg. We're now approaching 8:30 p.m, which is well over time. Unless Richard, Brian, Alison or Greg want to make any final comment, I might wrap things up. Sorry, did I hear something? Was that you, Bevan? No? Okay. Look, we're now at 8:26. I might call it. What strikes me about the discussion tonight is that the hope is that much can be done using the models that the Assange campaign and others use. So it's important for people to understand that it's not a law of nature that we're tied to the United States, as difficult as it will be to unravel ourselves. But I think the striking part of the discussions this evening, for me at least, is that I bury myself in this sort of stuff quite frequently, and there's just so much that was raised tonight that I didn't know, which makes me wonder to the average ordinary Australian, what's happening in Australia, is it known to them, and how we might facilitate that if they're avoiding news, and how mainstream media is letting us down because a lot of the discussion tonight involved information that I wasn't aware of. So there is hope, and I think meetings like this help to facilitate a pathway, as it did with the Assange campaign. It's a lot of conversations, it's a lot of meetings, it's closed door conversations, and I think this is the start of the Anti-AUKUS coalition, is the start of very great things on this topic. I would recommend the Australian Financial Review series recently on AUKUS. They seem to be fleshing out some really interesting information about how it all transpired and where it's likely to fall very, very short. But I don't think they've delved in too much to the other pillars within AUKUS. So look, I would encourage you to not give up, to keep talking about it, to circulate this webinar, because it will be made available to the public. And I'm sure if there are any questions, we can direct them to the panelists on an individual basis. But on that note, if you're all happy to conclude, I wish to thank Alison, I wish to thank Brian, Richard, Greg, Shirley, of course, and Bevan for coordinating this event. Again, our regards to Mary. I hope she's feeling better soon. And I wish you all a very good night, and hope to see you back here discussing this issue in the not too distant future.
Thanks, Kellie.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Kellie, before we leave, Kellie.
Yes.
I couldn't help myself.
Before we leave.
And I changed Ronnie to a job.
Is that you, Bevan?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to thank, and you've just done it, to thank the speakers tonight for their enlightening and inspirational contributions to our meeting, but also our thanks to you as the chairperson and facilitator.
Thank you
for your experience and wisdom in guiding our proceedings so smoothly and effectively. And in conclusion, can we express our hope that this evening's discussion will inspire us to commit and recommit to the building of that mass movement of Australian people to address the most important national political issue of our times, liberation from the grip the United States has on Australia, so that Australia as a nation can become an independent country, a nation that cares for its people, and one dedicated to building peace in our region and indeed the world.
Woo.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bevan. Well said.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Yep, thanks, people.